Well, that's good of you to have a word of encouragement to Anthony Seibold. Did you go in the cinema room? Did you show him a movie or something?
We did actually. We went in there and watched a little bit of football at
Did
one
you?
stage of the day. He was over at my place for a few hours. That was back actually at the back end of his coaching tenure with the Broncos. Paul White, who was the CEO of the Broncos at that time, just reached out. They were doing as much as they could to support Anthony, and you got to understand, like the Broncos is obviously a very high-profile position, and things weren't going too well for them up there at the time. And there's a lot of pressure involved with NRL coaching at the best of times, let alone when you're in such a high-profile position as that. And Paul White just reached out to see if I would have a talk to him for a little bit of support, which was obviously I would. And I'd sort of had a few phone calls with him, and then we took the opportunity when he was down in Sydney for him to come and spend a day at my place. And we just talked football and coaching and virtually life. And I find that, and even aside from Anthony, that this is not the only time this has ever happened. I mean, it happens quite regularly, to be honest. And normally it's with coaches that have got to the back end of their time and you can see the end coming, and they're kind of searching for answers as to what's gone wrong. And what I find with all of them, that it's not the coaching and it's not the knowledge of football that beats them. It's everything that goes around it. It's all the other things that the head coach now has to contend with these days. And in fact, anyone in rugby league, and the most vicious of that can obviously be media and social media and the way they're treated in those areas. And it can be very, very taxing on them. It's a difficult enough job at the best of times, other than having to put up with some of the stuff they have to put up with. And I think Anthony, if he had his time over again, would probably do things differently. The one thing I wanted to stress to him was that it wasn't the end for him. Failure is a part of your journey. Failure is a part of your future success. And I said, that little thing I said to him, don't hide behind the curtains. I said, walk around with your head up, mate, and you'll rise again, go and do some assistant jobs. But the day will come where you'll be a head coach again. I'm 100% certain of that. And I'm thankful that it's happened for him. He's now got the Manly job. They've started the season off very well. He's a very knowledgeable man on the game of rugby league. There's no risk in the world. It's not about the coaching and it's not about the knowledge of the game that I think sometimes gets these rookie coaches into trouble. It's more dealing with the rough and tumble of life in the NRL and exposure to media the way it is today, and particularly social media and the way, and even young players of today are very judgmental of coaches, and it's not an easy environment whatsoever. But
what does that mean? What do you mean the young players are judgmental?
It's different. It's very, very different. I was even talking to Eddie Jones the other day. We interviewed him for Stan, and we were talking about the players today compared to say 20, 30 years ago, and it is different. Young players today are very demanding, and they're very judgmental, and it's very much an individual thing, and it can be quite taxing on coaches. I don't know that I'd like to coach in today's world.
Yeah, you mentioned his knowledge of the game. I suppose the evolution of sporting coaches in all codes is an interesting element of this. And during that story last night, Danny Weidler had on the news, Anthony Seibold highlighted how he'd sat down with the whole playing group there at Manly, and it was a bit of an honesty session, but he said he was open and said, I didn't know whether I had the wherewithal to take on a head coaching job here again, but I'm here and I'm going to do it. And he said, I suppose that is that indication of a bit of maturity? That's something, putting your ego aside and showing your vulnerable side, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a part, I guess, what every club has gone through the off-season. That's about connectivity and building relationships and building trust and getting to know the face behind the face rather than just the footballer. You're getting to know the person as well. And if you have that affinity with them, if you have that relationship with them, it helps in your communication. That will help in your building of your relationship with someone that you're going to be spending a lot of time with over the next 12 months and maybe for years. So for him to be a part of that process and expose himself like that, and I've sat through what's happened at the Bulldogs, and I've certainly been a part of it with other clubs, and it can be quite a revealing process for the individuals when they tell their life stories and where they'd come from and how they feel mentally. And we're only talking about, we talk a lot about mental health these days, and I don't guess it shocks anyone that we have young players under a lot of pressure and different things happen in their lives, and some of them come from from very difficult backgrounds, and we'd have anything up to a dozen players a year, probably in private counselling and all that sort of thing. But we need to support more our staff and our coaches as well, because they are really in a high pressure situation. It's a difficult job. It's highly scrutinised. You know, back when I coached years ago, we didn't have all the commentary, and we didn't have all the magazine shows, and we didn't have all the so-called experts in the media that we have today. We didn't have so many ex-players and ex-coaches commenting in the media and critiquing everything that happened, and giving their advice, and, you know, pulling fans this way and that way, depending on how they learned. That just wasn't there. You know, it was, people may have well been saying it, but they're saying it at the pub or at home, and they're not saying it on social media, and they're certainly not getting quoted in the media about it, and placing more pressure on individuals. And you know, we do know that the media will target individuals because they have their own agendas and they have their own favourites, and you know, that's an unfortunate part of our game, an unfortunate part of our media, but you can't control it, so you just have to deal with it.
All right. So from what you're seeing, you put Turbo, who's going to be fit for round one, back in there in DCE, and they've got a proper football team.
Oh, they have. Well, they had a proper football team last year.
Yeah.
They self-destructed last year, and I'm still not up with exactly what happened at that time, but something obviously happened, because they went from being a serious finals contender to sort of dropping out of the race. So, provided that, and that would have been a part of the whole connectivity and relationship building over the off season, to understand where everyone comes from, and be very supportive with each other. And if they can get that part of it right, the football's never been a problem to Manly. Manly never had problems with football. They're a great football club and a tough football club, and